Hi, welcome. Thank you for joining me. My name is Lakeisha Oliver. I'm a clinical professional counselor intern with Solutions of Change. Earlier in the month, we released a video stating that we'd start monthly mental health topics. This is an effort to make mental health make sense. So this month's topic is emotional intelligence. A lot of us may be wondering, what exactly is emotional intelligence and why should it be important to me? Well, hopefully, if you stick with me through this presentation and join us for our monthly group forum, we'll get a better understanding of what emotional intelligence is and how it impacts our lives. Let's get started. So, the question that we're asking is, are you emotionally intelligent? And how we're going to figure that out is I'll be talking about what emotional intelligence is, the foundation of becoming an emotionally intelligent individual, and what's next. What do we do with this information? First, what is emotional intelligence? Emotional intelligence is our ability to be aware of, control, and express our emotions. And that leads into handling our interpersonal relationships sensibly and empathetically. But what does that mean? That means that we've done an assessment of ourselves and that we recognize that our experiences, our thought processes, and our behaviors are connected to our emotions. And then we assess ourselves even further to say if we are effectively communicating in our relationships. Now, these could be relationships with a significant other, with family members, with our children, and even professionally. It all works in an effort to function in a way that is productive. When we're exploring the benefits of emotional intelligence, there's a lot of things to consider, and a short list of those include self-awareness, self-management, self-performance, social awareness, relationship management, and people's performance. But they do fall into three specific groups. Those groups are emotions based on our individual emotions, behaviors, and work. And we talk about work, we're talking about how we show up in a professional sense and how we're using our emotional intelligence in order to move forward and be successful in our professional goals. Two of the items on that list stand out and kind of roll over into the others, and those are self awareness and social awareness. In self awareness, we recognize that our emotions, thoughts, and values impact our behavior. And in that, we assess our strengths and weaknesses. Okay, let's not call them weaknesses, let's call them limitations, because we are recognizing opportunities to grow. And that's the other part of self awareness, is to make sure that we're recognizing in those moments what the opportunity for growth is. In the other category of social awareness, we're talking about understanding our environment, having positive influences on that environment. And that can happen based on making positive connections or recognizing the influence that we have on others and the influence that they have on us. So, what this can look like is if, as an individual, you recognize that you have a strength in communication, you find that you're an effective communicator, and when you're talking to people, they understand you and they can see things from your point of view. And you find yourself in a situation where you are communicating with someone who is not as effective in communication as you are. If you're becoming a more emotionally intelligent individual, then that means that you recognize the opportunity for growth. So you are controlling your emotions in that moment in order to show what effective communication looks like. And in that, not only do you reap the benefit of being able to communicate your thoughts and feelings to another individual, but you also take that opportunity to educate them on what emotional intelligence through effective communication looks like. And that goes back to the old adage that we say, we teach people how to treat us. So being that representation means that you have the opportunity to inspire growth in someone else. And then that goes back to that influence that we have on others, but also that influence that they have on us. Listen, I know that was a lot, and I hope that you're hanging with me because this is supposed to make sense. So what I'm going to do now is break down some practices that we can use to become more emotionally intelligent individuals. The first practice is self-reflection. In self-reflection, we analyze ourselves to determine what our emotional strengths and limitations are. We look at the effect of our mood on our thoughts and decision making, and then the root causes of others' reactions. Now, sometimes when we're looking at the root causes of others' reactions, it can become difficult because that can be tricky. You don't know exactly what experience or interaction another person has had that would make them react to you in a certain way. But sometimes we can recognize the language and mannerisms that we use that can cause conflict. And when we recognize that, it makes it easier to resolve that conflict and get to a more functional space with ourselves and with others. So here's an old school mama tip that we can all use. Stop and think before speaking and acting. And that means that we're making sure that we're not making permanent decisions based on temporary emotions. And what that can look like is telling somebody that you're done with them, that you don't want to be bothered with them anymore. When what you're really thinking and feeling is that their actions or their words have really hurt you and you don't know how to process that, or you don't know what to do with that. And that's okay. When you're saying something like that what you said or did hurt me, then that gives the person the opportunity to know what you're actually feeling. And that works a lot better than saying, I'm done with you, or I don't want to be bothered with you. Now that rolls into control of our thoughts. And when we're thinking about control of our thoughts, there's something to consider. And the first thing that we can consider is our values. What are our values? So this is a question we need to ask ourselves individually. And then when we realize what our values are, we need to ask ourselves another question, and that is, are we in harmony with what those values are? So say that I'm a person who really values honesty. Am I showing up as honest as I possibly can in the communications and relationships that I have in my life? Meaning, am I not holding someone accountable for something that I'm not willing to hold myself accountable for? And so if I say that I need people to be honest with me, it's my responsibility, again, as an emotionally intelligent individual, to be as honest as I possibly can. Another thing is resisting our emotions, formulating our responses. So in a moment where you're frustrated or you're angry or you're hurt, you want to make sure that what comes out of our mouths and the way that we represent ourselves in those moments aren't things that we can't take back. And so if I'm saying in that moment that, I'm frustrated or I'm angry because, that's more appropriate than, again, going back to that thought of I'm done with you, or, the world is going to stop turning. We're going to stop thinking in extremes when we're becoming more emotionally intelligent. And then we're going to ask ourselves, are we allowing our emotions to control us? And that goes all hand in hand. So remember, we're controlling our thoughts in a way that we allow ourselves to be represented as who we really want to be. Now, this might be a hard one for some of us, and it's embracing constructive criticism. Now, we need to recognize that there's a difference between constructive criticism and abusive nature. And so the question is, are we being receptive to feedback? Which means that when someone is telling us something about ourselves, which can sometimes be hard to digest, nobody really wants to hear about themselves, especially in a negative way. However, it's important that we listen to what people are saying and listen for the deeper meaning. So if someone is saying that when you speak to me in this way, it hurts me, it's our responsibility, again, as becoming a more emotionally intelligent individual, to say, okay, what can I do differently? If I value this relationship, how can I embrace that constructive criticism and make positive changes? And then questioning, what can you learn from that situation? Please remember that we are human beings again, and we're always growing and learning and changing. And we're hoping that that change is positive. And so in order to make change, it's important that we're taking the time to learn more about ourselves. And in our relationships and our interactions is a great opportunity to discover what we can learn about ourselves. Additionally, we want to ask, are we being true to ourselves? Now, that kind of goes back to what our values are. But the question that we ask is, do you say what you mean and mean what you say? If you say what you mean and mean what you say, there is sometimes some room for interpretation. However, if you're being very clear in your communication, then interpreting it from another perspective will hopefully lead the person to understand exactly where you're coming from. And then in that, we can also explore others' value systems. And so that is becoming more true to ourselves by discovering new things. And so maybe there's someone that you know who's really successful at their relationship. And they've been in their relationship for a very long time. What we see is happiness and respect. And we wonder to ourselves, like, where does that come from? How can I have some of that? And so when we're exploring others' value systems, we can take away some of those good things that they have in their lives and put that into our life and make it work in a way that helps us function in being the people that we're trying to be. The next is praise and reward yourself and others. So here is something that sometimes we forget to do. Tell yourself that you did a good job. It's important for you to hear in your head, in your self-talk, that you are performing well, that you did a good job. Acknowledgement and appreciation goes a long way, not just for us as an individual, but also offering that to someone else. If you notice that someone else is doing something that's really great, it doesn't take anything away from you to say, you did a really awesome job. And then what they hear is that acknowledgement and appreciation. And again, this is one of the ways to become a more emotionally intelligent person, but also facilitate those great relationships and that common respect between individuals. So listening and providing effective feedback. The first part is listening for understanding. Now, sometimes I know that we have those thoughts running around in our head and we're just waiting for the moment in the conversation to be able to say what we've been thinking. However, a good practice when we're listening for understanding is to repeat back to the person what we think we heard them say. And that gives them the opportunity to say, no, that's not exactly what I was trying to say. Let me see if I can explain it in a different way. Or yes, that is exactly what I'm trying to say, and I'm glad that you understand that. But if we're rushing to say what's in our head, we're going to miss out on understanding what that other person is trying to say. Now, the other portion can be a little bit difficult, providing effective feedback, because we're talking about providing positive and negative feedback. And a lot of times we find ourselves in a space where we don't want to hear anything bad about ourselves. Not today. Not today. I don't want to hear it today. But one effective tool that we can use, and it's a bad word sandwich, but we're going to call it a poop sandwich. So when we have the poop sandwich, the poop is in the middle. So we want to say something positive and then insert that negative feedback in the middle and then say something else positive. It can sound like, I really appreciate the fact that you tried to do the dishes. I really appreciate that. But if you don't clean all of the things, all of the dirt and food off of the dishes, when you put it in the dishwasher, they don't come out clean. But I love you and I'm happy that you're trying to help. So I said something great or something nice in the beginning, and then I put that negative feedback in the middle, but then I close that thought process with something positive. So I'm not forcing the person to focus on that negative feedback. I'm giving them positive feedback, but I'm also giving them something that they can work on. So that is a good way to provide positive and negative feedback. But don't forget to provide feedback. Don't forget to tell people what you think and how you feel, and do it in an effective way so that it impacts them in a positive way and not a negative way. And then the last tip to becoming a more emotionally intelligent person is the courage to apologize. And we're talking about being vulnerable in honesty. And so, again, we start off by saying that we're human beings and we're not perfect and we all make mistakes. And so at some point, you're going to make a mistake. We're all going to make a mistake. If you haven't made one yet, then you are extraterrestrial and I appreciate your presence here. However, when you do make a mistake, being vulnerable enough to open yourself up and say, listen, I made a mistake and I'm sorry. I'll do better next time, or I recognize what I did wrong. That really encourages the person to be honest with you as well and to apologize when they make a mistake. And then we're talking about relationship versus ego. And so when we're having that courage to apologize, we're telling that person that the relationship that we have is more important than my ego. So if I'm apologizing to you and I'm being vulnerable in that honesty, I want you to recognize that the importance of our relationship is more important than what I feel in the moment, with that little voice in the back of my head that tells me I'm always right, because I'm always right, says, I'm saying to you that I appreciate your friendship, your relationship, the love that we share between each other more than I have to be right. And so having the courage to apologize is a very emotionally intelligent thing to do. Now that we've learned what emotional intelligence is and some tools, tips, and practices that can help us in becoming more emotionally intelligent, the question that we're asking is what's next? What do we do with that information? The first thing that we can do is explore our individual emotional intelligence. We might find that we're already doing some of these things. If you're already doing some of these things, don't forget to praise and reward yourself for doing a good job. Next, you can find opportunities to utilize emotional intelligence. So if you recognize that there's conflict in your relationship, or you have difficulty communicating, difficulty getting your point across, try utilizing some of these practices and see if they work, and see if they help you in your journey to becoming who it is that you want to be in the world. Don't forget to please register for our Emotional Intelligence Group Forum at the end of the month. We look forward to having dialogue about emotional intelligence and how it impacts us as individuals, and questions about how we can utilize it better. And then remember, if you need further assistance, don't be afraid to seek help. Help-seeking behaviors are one of the most important things that we can do to influence our mental health in a positive way. Thank you so much for taking the time to listen to this presentation, and I hope to see you at our group forum at the end of the month.